again, wine lovers. Today I'm going to take you through the basic steps of some winemaking. Often when I'm talking to prospective winemakers, they ask me, what would be an easy way to start making wine? And you can buy the juice kits and those things, but if you're trying to get somebody on the hook to make wine, get them started, they're going to want something that's easy and they want something that's fairly quick. And I've discovered one that I really like, and it's called Skeeter Pea. You can go to skeeterpea.com. There's a fellow there that's developed an excellent formula for this wine. It's actually lemon wine. The recipe's not hard to follow. The ingredients are easily available. The whole process takes as little as 6 weeks when you've got something that's ready to drink. So here are some of the basics that you're going to need to make Skeeter Pea. Of course, you need a primary fermenter, about a 6-gallon pail. You can get all of this stuff at your wine supply store. You'll need a few little ingredients that available at the same stores that you would buy this would be yeast nutrient, yeast energizer. They're cheap chemicals, a couple bucks a bottle for this stuff. And wine tannin is the other ingredient that's going to go in early in the process. Generally, Skeeter Pea or lemon wine is a bit hard to ferment because the lemon juice that you buy at the store, this is the generic real lemon, it's a couple bucks a bottle, has sulfites in it. It's a preservative. It doesn't want to ferment. So you're going to have to take some action to get this thing rolling. And there's a couple of steps to that. What I do typically is made with a leftover wine slurry or basically an active yeast from a prior wine batch that you've already done. Well, if you're a beginner, you may not have another batch of wine rolling, so I'm going to make my own slurry. I've done this a few times with good success. So what I've done is I bought some juice at the store, and you have to look for a juice that has no preservatives. This is just straight apple juice. I usually get white grape because it doesn't influence the taste very much. This is all I could find at the moment, but you read the label, you don't want to see anything like potassium metabisulfite. Any kind of a sulfite in there is a preservative. It's going to make it hard to ferment. I'm going to make a starter with this to get just a small batch, a few ounces, with some yeast to make a starter. Then we'll add that to the lemon juice later, and once that is rocking and rolling, it'll start the lemon much easier than if you just put the yeast straight into the lemon juice. So here's the yeast that's recommended for this process. It's a Lauven EC 1118. Not a very glamorous name, but this stuff will ferment concrete. It'll go up to 18% in some cases. It's just the most reliable thing you can get. This is what we're going to end up using. So to get started, of course, with any winemaking, you have to make sure that anything that touches your wine is clean and sanitary. I've already washed this bucket. This is a clean stainless bowl for my starter, and I'm going to mix up some sanitizer to make sure that nothing funky happens while this thing is working. This is one that I love right here. It's called One Step Sanitizer. This stuff, there's other kinds out there. Most of them are pretty cheap. This one's a little more expensive, but I like it because it dissolves easy, never fails. You can buy that at your wine supply store too. So I'm going to mix a little bit of this up. It's just 1 tablespoon to a gallon of warm water. And we're going to clean up our utensils before we start. Okay. In this step of the process, we're going to make the invert sugar for the Skeeter Pea. So I have my ingredients laid out here. We're going to use 1/3 of a cup of the lemon juice, the real lemon, about 7 to 8 pounds of granulated sugar, and about 8 cups of water. We're going to add those ingredients in, boil that up for about 30 minutes. Actually, you don't boil it for 30 minutes. You bring it to a boil, pull it back to a simmer for 30 minutes. Then we'll add that into our juice that's already in the primary fermenter. in this step I have my gallon of sanitizer mixed up. It's dissolved well into the warm water. I'm going to use that to sanitize my utensils. Just pour that into my primary fermenter and then take a paper towel and make sure that the entire inside is saturated with this. About 2 minutes of contact is all it's required to kill about anything that would be in there. I'm going to transfer some of this sanitizing solution into my stainless bowl where I'm going to do the starter mixture with the yeast and the apple juice. In the previous step, you saw me in the kitchen of my home, and I made a simple syrup with 8 cups of water, 16 cups of sugar. That translates to about 7 to 8 pounds of sugar. Also added in 1/3 of a cup of the lemon juice. Don't know what that does, but that's what the recipe calls for. I think it's all explained on the website, skeeterp.com. So my bucket is sanitized. It doesn't have to be rinsed out. You just pour out the excess water and you're ready to start adding ingredients. So at this point I only add 2 of the 3 quarts of lemon juice into the mix. In order to get the thing started, you start out with 2 and then you add more later. We'll get into that as that comes along. Of course, you can always go to the website for all the measurements and ingredients that go into this. So for now, 2 quarts of juice going into the primary. Okay, 2 quarts of lemon juice in the primary fermenter. Now I'm going to add this syrup that I started earlier. Be really careful with this. This is still pretty hot from the stove. You can imagine what a sugar syrup on your skin would do. If it got onto you, it would not come off and it would just sit there and burn straight through to earth, I'm pretty sure. So I'm going to be really careful with this. That's in there. As you can see, it's only up to a couple of gallons. Well, maybe you can't, but we got a long way to go. We're going to end up with 5.5 gallons of liquid in here. But for now, we have the syrup and the juice. And this is actually going to sit for 24 to 48 hours, so you can see why you need to work in sanitary circumstances. If you got sugar in something and the wrong kind of a microbe gets in there, you're building something you don't want to have there. So you might ask also why I have a whisk in my sanitary solution over there. Well, if you check the recipe at skeeterp.com, you'll see that as this sits for a day or 2, you're going to need to introduce some oxygen into this mix, because those 2 bottles of lemon juice I just put in there, they still have preservatives in there. You've got to overcome that preservative in order to get this ferment started. So I'm going to give this a swizzle, get some air into this, and I'll do this again as it goes over the next day or 2. You know, every several hours I'll hit it again. Now I'm going to add the rest of this water a little bit later. But the next step, now that this is off and running, let me get this out of the way, and I'm going to start the yeast. All right. In this step, I'm going to buy a little bit of insurance. Let me explain what I mean. I'm going to add the yeast to the apple juice pretty soon, but even yet, I still want to make sure that this yeast is taking off before I do that. So, just going to put a 1/4 cup of water in this, about 100 to 104 degrees or so. I'm going to put a little bit of the yeast in here. I'll let it start to foam and get going, and we're going to add that to the apple juice. Okay, so this water is warm enough. I'm going to put the contents of this yeast, the 1 whole packet, right in here into this 1/4 cup of 104 degree water. About 15 minutes, that thing will be foaming, taken off, ready to go. that's doing its thing, I'm going to put my apple juice in this bowl that I've sanitized. Now, I'm not going to use a ton of this juice. I never used apple juice before. I usually use white grape. I don't want this to influence the flavor of my citrus drink. So I'm just going to make sure that there's enough to get a good start on this stuff. I don't know, a pint maybe. Sounds good to me. This apple juice is room temperature, so I wouldn't use refrigerated because you want this yeast to take off and fly as soon as it hits. So if you have refrigerated juice that's no preservatives, take it out a little bit ahead of time, probably help to keep it warm. 70 or 80 degrees is a good temperature to ferment. My juice and syrup mixture is standing. Hopefully the preservatives are coming out of it. I want to hit it with a whisk again a few times in the next day or so. Everything's covered up so that no bugs get in there. I have my apple juice ready for the yeast. And look at that. Here's my yeast. I'm going to dip you down so you can see this right here. I got a nice foam on top there. I can see that that yeast is good. That's going to go into my apple juice. Alright, here's where we learn to use a hydrometer. Got this soaking in the sanitary solution. And this may be hard to see, but buy one of these things. $5 or something, and this is so important to your winemaking. This one is a triple scale hydrometer. Has 3 different scales on here. The one I like to work with is specific gravity. When you put this in a solution, it tells you how much sugar is in it. If it is sinking all the way to the 1.000, that means there is no sugar left. I'm going to test this juice in a minute. I expect it'll be about 1.050, so it will float up to that level. I'm going to put in a little bit of sugar to buy insurance that that yeast has something to eat to get going. So just a second, we'll check this out and see where it goes. Now here at Tomfoolery Labs, we sort of do things on a shoestring. You don't have to have all this expensive stuff to make wine. So I use a turkey baster for my wine thief, you might say. I can draw a juice sample out with this. It works just fine. Keep it sanitary. Already had it in the solution, so it would be. The hydrometer came in this little tube. It's not what it's necessarily used for, but it doesn't leak, so I carefully place that in there. We're going to draw some juice out and see what the sugar content is. Alright, the hydrometer is floating, and if I can get it unstuck from the side, we can see that, at least I can see that it's about 1.04. So that's only a potential alcohol of about 5% if we just let that run by itself. That tells you, it gives you a starting point. So I'm going to add some sugar to this apple juice and bring it up. Alright, so I've added the sugar to the apple juice, drawn up a sample, and I can see that my tablespoon of sugar brought me up to about 1.05 on specific gravity. So I think I'm going to do that a couple more tablespoons, get it up to about 1.07. That's an easy level for the yeast to digest, and it also makes sure that there's plenty there for them to work with when they get working. As soon as I've done that, then the yeast starter is going to go in the apple juice. All right, so we've reached a kind of a stopping point here almost. One more thing. Got the juice and the syrup setting in here with the preservatives coming out of them as they set for the next day or two. And like I said, I'll be out here introducing oxygen in with a whisk. We have our proof yeast that's well foamed, that's ready to go into the apple juice. I'm just going to do that now. those things will start eating right away. If it's nice and warm in here, it'll go pretty quick. The thing is, this may foam, it may not. I've had it do it both ways. I did a batch not that long ago where I thought nothing was happening. When I put my yeast in, watched it for a day or two, didn't see any activity. You've got to check it with the hydrometer. Checked it with the hydrometer, it was almost completely finished. It was almost dry. So if you don't have a hydrometer, you're flying blind. You just don't have a steering wheel here, you know? So I'm going to let this sit right alongside this juice for at least 24 hours. I'm going to come out here tomorrow, check the gravity, make sure that that gravity is coming down, because that means that the yeast is consuming the sugars, making alcohol. That's what we want. This has got to be rocking and rolling before it goes into here. One other final thing I need to do before this gets put to rest for a day, I'm going to top this up with some good filtered water to 5.5 gallons. That'll do it for today, but in the next steps we will be combining the juice that's beginning to ferment with the juice that's in here that's had the preservatives evaporating out. We're going to add the wine tannin, the yeast nutrient, the yeast energizer is going to go in there. That's going to sit again until we see that specific gravity come down to a certain point, about 1.05. And then we know the yeast is really working. Then we're going to come back and add the third quart of juice into the mixture, and we're going to add some more nutrients so that we know that that thing's got everything it needs to complete the job. So until tomorrow, or maybe the next day, see you later. Back in the lab now. About 30 hours into this process, I added the starter yeast into the juice and syrup. That was about 2 days ago, and I want you to see what I've got now. I'll just put this down here. Got a giant head of foam on that thing. It is really taking off, doing well. So, now I can't let this go too far, because you notice at the beginning I only put 2 quarts of lemon juice in the mix. It calls for 3 total, but you can't put it in all at once. You got to step it up as you go. So I'm going to take a reading on the sugar content now and see where we stand and if it's time to put the rest in. Alright, let's see if I can get this where you can see it. We're looking at 1.062, the best I can make out here. Now at 1.050 is where I want to add the next batch of juice. So we started at 1.075. That's going to give me about 10% alcohol. I don't add the next juice until about 1.050. Given the time that's passed, I think I need a few more hours, maybe even tomorrow I'll come back and we'll put the final addition of the lemon juice in this batch. See you then. We're in the 4th day of fermentation, and the must is down to a level where we can add the additional juice now. Remember, we've added 2 quarts earlier. We have to add 1 quart later to keep this going. Well, this is where you can change up the recipe a little bit, or at least I do. I like 2.5 quarts of lemon juice and a pint of lime juice. That's the way I do mine. That's my favorite. I've done it with all lemon, done it with wine slurries. This is what I like the best. It seems to have a brighter taste to it. And remember, these still have preservatives in them, but at this point, this yeast is rolling along well enough that we can add these right in. It won't even know they're there. It'll keep going just fine. So I do have a little bit more of yeast energizer and yeast nutrient going in to help this along. I've put a little warm water in there and dissolved it in the water. So I'm going to add this in. I would say today's Thursday, sometime this weekend. Hopefully this will be finished up and we can transfer it out into a carboy, put a bubbler on it. We're about a week into the process of making our Skeeter pea, and I'm going to show you in just a moment how this is progressing. But suffice it to say that most of the sugar is consumed. I've checked the reading. It's down below 1.01, 1 being completely consumed. So let me show you what I'm up to here. Let's have a look in the bucket. You can see that we are just about devoid of foam now. There's not really much action going on. So right here, got my wallpaper tub that has all my racking equipment in. I'm going to add some sanitizing solution to that in a moment. And I've got a carboy that's sanitizing right there, ready to accept the juice. This is the point we've been trying to get to for about a week. As you can see, the wine is now in the bottle. There's a little bit of head space here, but I'll add some water to that. I just use filtered water out of the tap. That works just fine. It won't dilute the wine very much. A lot of cloudiness, as you can see. In the prior scene, you could see the bottom of the bucket. There was a ton of yeast. It's called lees. Dead yeast that settles to the bottom. All that's been left behind when you siphon this out. I've got a nice slow bubbling going on here, telling me there's just a little bit of sugar left to be consumed. We're going to put this in the closet in a dark place, let it sit for probably 2 weeks, and go ahead and finish the process. Now the recipe calls for an ingredient called sparkaloid to help this wine clear. I have never used that process. I've had no trouble getting this to clear on its own. At the very end, there might be a little bit of cloudiness. I don't really care who hasn't drunk lemonade that has a little bit of cloudiness on there. So this will go in the closet for about 2 weeks. At that point, we'll add some sorbate to kill off the yeast. We will sweeten it, put it back in there after it's been racked into a clean container. Put it back for a couple more weeks to make sure that it doesn't re-ferment. When you put in the second dose of sugar, you're not looking for more alcohol. You're looking to change the taste of it, to take away the tartness and bring out the sweetness. So 4 more weeks into that process, maybe a little bit more sitting to clarify, and after that, no aging is needed. It's pretty much ready to drink when you're ready to bottle, I should say, at that point, and then after that, it can be drank anytime. When I left you last time, I told you that in a couple of weeks I was going to have you back here, and we were going to rack the wine into a fresh container, put some stabilizer in it to kill the yeast, wait a couple of weeks, and let the yeast settle out and sweeten this batch of Skeeter pea. Well, you're not going to get to see that step. A little bit of a tragedy happened while I was trying to shoot the last video. The camera came unclipped from the tripod, fell to its death on the concrete. So, the step that you missed, not a big deal. It's not something you can't figure out. You're going to see it again today. We're just going to rack this Skeeter pea into a clean bucket, just like I did the last time, get it off of whatever settling might be in the bottom. If you remember the last video, when I got this into the secondary fermenter, you might remember it was very cloudy when we put it in there. You can see now it has a nice amber color. It's not cloudy at all. Just a minor amount of settling, and I didn't use the sparkaloid that's recommended in the recipe. It settles all by itself, cleans right up. So today, all we're going to do is one of the final steps here is the second addition of sugar. We've got 6 cups of sugar in this bowl. We're simply going to siphon it out of this container and off the dead yeast. into a bucket where we can add the sugar, sweeten it up, give it a stir, check the level of sweetness on it, let it set for a couple weeks, and make sure that no re-fermentation happens. This is not for additional alcohol, this is just for sweetening. Earlier in the video I had told you that due to my camera crashing to the floor, you missed one step in the process. It was just a racking step where I transferred the wine into a clean carboy. However, there was one thing I wanted to mention, and that was the step of degassing. That apparently is something that needs to be done with lemon wine due to the fact it builds up some, I think it's sulfur dioxide, sometimes when it ferments. So this is what I use. I don't have any expensive equipment for that process. All I did was take a stainless steel wire. You could probably pick it up at a good welding shop. It's just stainless steel filler rod for TIG welding. Not a big deal. I just bent it like an egg beater on the end, and works just fine. You hook this to a cordless drill, slip it down into the carboy, and give it a good spin. Just like you're beating up, some kind of batter when you're in the kitchen. You'd be surprised how much foam this makes, how much gas will come out of that wine. It's very effective. That's about all you missed. I did do that as I racked into the carboy the second time. Just a quick note before we go on and sweeten this batch of Skeeter P. Wanted to show you the hydrometer reading here. It is about 0.990, looks like, which means all the initial sugar has been used. That means we're good to go. We've fermented dry. We can move on to the next step. You can see that there's very little settling left after 2 weeks. Well, while I'm racking that back into another carboy, it's going to sit for a couple more weeks to make sure that no re-fermentation happens with that addition of sugar. In 2 weeks, it's going to be ready to bottle. Well, we're in the home stretch, washing up some bottles right now. If you don't like doing dishes, maybe winemaking is not for you, because winemaking involves bottle washing. To make it easier, I've made this little stainless wand with a sort of a chamois-like material on the end. That speeds things up considerably when you're washing bottles. This is the sanitizing step in the bottling process. I have the same solution that I sanitize my other equipment in this container. There's a little plunger pump in the center here. We're going to shoot some of the sanitizer up in the bottles to make sure everything is clean and, bug free. Well, there it is. This is a moment we've been working for 6 weeks. The point where you get everything in the bottle makes it all worthwhile. There it is, about 50 bottles of lemon lime Skeeter P, or in my brand it's called Lemonade by Tomfoolery Wines. It's a beautiful amber color, all clear, no settling.